Hey there, it's Zach, and feel free to argue. Just had a couple of nice scrubbed young kids come up to my door, and I guess they were asking about a new church that they're getting set up. Didn't bother to inquire about which church it is because I'm not going to be attending. But it was interesting the kind of questions that they were asking. You know, I hope I gave them some thoughtful answers, but one of the questions I thought was really interesting. They said, why do you think people don't attend church? And for me, I mean, this question's pretty easy. I mean, I've studied the world's religions and kind of found them all wanting, but I wanted to kind of get into it a little bit more with them and talk about the varieties of reasons. You know, I kind of interpreted the question more broadly. And I've noticed that there are basically three different groups, and to a certain extent, I kind of fall into a limited extent in all three of them. So I kind of talk about the three groups. The first group of people are people who come at it from a scientific bent, and they say, okay, if this holy book, whichever holy book, is the source of, you know, all knowledge in the world, then we can at least assume that this book will not have any demonstrably false scientific claims in it. And I think, you know, this is like would describe people like, for example, CDK 007, you know, a person who does a lot of videos here on YouTube, who's coming at it from this scientific framework for the most part. He's done a couple of philosophical vids, but mostly he's coming at it from a scientific viewpoint. He said in the Bible it says X, and we can see from, you know, science that X is flat out impossible, and if X is impossible, then you have to kind of reject everything else in there. And I think, you know, this is one valid way of coming at atheism. A second way is people come at it from more of a moral, social standpoint. And they say, okay, let's look at, you know, this holy book, whatever it is, and, you know, examine whatever moral claims that it makes. And, you know, once again, if this is the revealed work of, you know, whatever creator, then this should be basically morally right in every single respect. There shouldn't be any moral problems, like obvious kind of moral flaws in the work. And, you know, a perfect example of this, you know, and I'm going to look at Christianity here because it's just what I'm most familiar with, but I mean, I have looked at all the world's major religions because I was a student of this stuff for a while before I kind of came to my decision. Is basically the way that the Bible treats slavery. Now, if you look at the Bible, you can find all these different passages which, you know, talk about how it's okay to have slaves, that, you know, and if you are a slave, you find yourself in a position where you are a slave, you know, how you're supposed to act and to be a good slave. And in nowhere in the Bible does it actually say, you know, that you should not have slaves, or, you know, condemns these people who are slaveholders and says, you know, that this is something that, of course, is morally wrong, but it's just a reflection of the way things were at the time, or any kind of things like that, the kind of justifications that people will make in defense of the same things. But there in the Bible doesn't give you that. It doesn't say, you know, flat out that slavery is wrong. And, you know, you can say that, you know, that's no big deal in these more enlightened times where the whole idea of slavery is just kind of out of fashion. I'm not saying that there are Christians out there right now that are saying that slavery is okay, but there sure were during the Civil War. You know, people in the Civil War, the anti-abolitionist folks down south, were saying that we have an absolute right to keep slaves. And why? Well, you know, it doesn't get any more moral than the Bible. It says right there in the Bible that we can have slaves, and that's all okay. You know, in fact, if we conquer people, we can, you know, and we sack the city, that we can kill all the men, kill all the boys, kill all the women who've had a man before, and if there are any virgins left over, we can keep those to rape as we see fit. Once again, this is there in the Bible. So, people who come at it from this sort of moral absolutist viewpoint, they can find fuel just about in any of the world's major religions in their holy books. Find things that, represent moral evolution, things that were okay at the time when these books were written, but, they don't have any kind of moral weight today. And the final way that I think people come to the atheist way of thinking is just by being treated so abominably by people advocating for one religion or another that they just kind of reject all religion based on the fact that, there are these people who are advocating for a particular religion, and they found these people to be behaving in a completely offensive manner. And I mean, just my experiences from, my association with a couple of religious organizations, like, at one point I was at a summer camp as a kid, and I remember very distinctly this whole incident where, the woman who was in charge of this Bible camp found out that I had not been baptized, and she told me I was going to hell, and started describing all the various things that were going to be happening to me in hell. And I mean, I was just a little kid. I mean, this was prior to me even being 10 years old, I'm certain of it. So, and I remember my mom coming there and basically reading the riot act to this vicious, nasty woman who was scaring, this nine-year-old kid with visions of the horrific afterlife that doesn't really exist. But I mean, that's the kind of cruelty, and this is just totally aside from more serious forms of, religious cruelty that exist in various cultures. I'm not even talking about like being abused by a Catholic preacher or anything. I mean, this is probably something that was considered very acceptable, that a heathen would get a good talking to about the dangers of hell and everything like that. So, this is the kind of stuff I was talking about with these poor, stunned, probably, 14 to 16-year-old girls who are taking this survey about this new church that they're trying to set up in the area. And, talking to them realistically about what I think religion really is. And trying to fall all over myself to make certain apologies, saying that, certainly I know that there are people who are members of churches, and even churches themselves, that do some, very good, very important things. But I always think, couldn't they do the same thing without God telling them to do it? And I guess that's what it all comes back down to for me. I've never seen any kind of proof. I've certainly never seen any proof for the kind of quasi-scientific things that, religions have kind of gotten themselves involved with. I don't think any of them have a really strong, consistent moral stance that I can respect. And I think some of the things that have been done in the name of religion by certain people have been abominable. So that's why I'm an atheist. That's why I told them I'm an atheist. What are your thoughts on the matter?